Hey everybody, I'm going to play through and comment on one of the greatest Gordon Lightfoot songs, which is sang a lot, and that is Canadian Railroad Trilogy. It's a celebration of the Canadian Transcontinental Railroad. You know, in America, we had the Transcontinental Railroad, which I think they came from the East and the West, and they met in 1869 at Promontory Point. I remember learning that years ago. And Canada had something similar right around the same time, so it's very similar. Their sort of Transcontinental Railroad. And in 1967, he was commissioned by the Canadian government to write a song commemorating, I think, something having to do with their centennial. You know, Canada achieved Dominion status from the British Empire in 1867. I knew that from before. And that kind of gave them almost like semi-autonomous status, or they are basically a sovereign country, but still kind of within the British family of, I guess they used to call it the Empire, now they call it the Commonwealth. But the Transcontinental Railroad is very similar. I think same kinds of people built it. It had sort of that North American culture. And I'm going to do something I hope won't offend the Canadians, but I'm going to show you some pictures of the American Transcontinental Railroad because I happen to have some nice ones in here. And I think they're similar enough. I don't know. But this is a great book. If you saw me do the White House Blues the other night, which is sometimes also called William McKinley's Lament, you saw some images from this little nice set of history books I've had since I think I was like first or second grade when my parents bought me this, because I think it came in the mail. Like every month you got a new volume, and I've had it all these years. And it might be something I really treasure for a lot of reasons, but it was also great reading for a boy, man, growing up. But you saw the other night I showed you some of Volume 7, which shows the assassination of William McKinley in that song White House Lament. I hope you'll watch that. And on this one, I've got out Volume 6 because it has some stuff on the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States. So, again, apologies to Canadian folks. We're not trying to culturally appropriate Mr. Lightfoot's excellent song and the ultimately Canadian significance of it. But the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States is pretty similar. It was right around the same time. Probably the same kind of men built it, if you think about it. But it's got a bunch of pictures by this Alton S. Tobey, who was a great artist, and then a lot of drawings by a guy named Richard Kluge. And they're all through here. Just great. And then I'll show you a few pictures out of this book while I play it. This is called The West. This was a gift to me. It's from the 90s, so it's not one of my older books, but it is kind of like what they used to call coffee table books. See, it's got pictures, a lot of photographs. And I was thinking about that while I was preparing my thoughts for this little video, how before the internet, these books were really cool. You know, people, I guess if you were snobby, you could say, well, they had a lot of pictures. They were kind of written for generally educated audiences. But that was one place where you could see a lot of these pictures. Today, a lot of this would be available on the internet in 2 seconds. Probably all of it's on the internet in 2 seconds. But here you got some nice photographs. And this came out in 96, and I'm realizing that was pretty much before the internet. So, and of course, this was way before the internet. So books like this with all these pictures really brought history to life, and you can sniff your nose at pictures and kind of more generally educated audience, but they're really important parts of history. But this book, which was kind of helped, Ken Burns is one of the people that put it together, has a lot of nice photos too, again, of the United States Transcontinental Railroad. So again, apologies to the Canadian people out there. But again, it's North America. It's kind of similar. And they were right around the same time. I think the Canadian Railroad was finished in the 1860s. And the United States version of that, of course, back then, a lot of that was just territories, you know, I think it went through. But it went all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. And so I'll show you some pictures. And then at the end, I'm gonna actually say a little bit about the great Gordon Lightfoot song and some of the guitar parts in it, because it's a really nice guitar part. So hope you'll consider watching. Oh, there was a time in this fair land when the railroad did not run, when the wild, majestic mountains stood alone against the sun. Long before the white man and long before the wheel, when the green, dark forest was too silent to be real. But time has no beginning and history has no bounds. Unto this wooden country they came from all around. They opened up the waterways and they walked the forest tall, built the mines and mills and the factories for the good of us all. And when a young man's fancy had turned into the spring, all the railroad men grew restless for to hear the hammers ring. Their minds were overflowing with the goodness of the day, with many a fortune won and lost and many a debt to pay. For they looked in the future, and what did they see? They saw an iron road stretching from the sea to the sea, bringing the goods to a young growing land, all up from the seaports and into their hands. Look away, sad day, across this mighty land, from the eastern shore to the western strand. So bring up the workers and bring up the rails. We've gotta lay down the tracks and tear up the tails. Open your heart, let the lifeblood flow. We gotta get on our way, 'cause we're moving too slow. Bring up the workers and bring up the rails. We gotta lay down the tracks and tear up the tails. Open your heart, let your lifeblood flow. We gotta get on our way, 'cause we're moving too slow. Beyond the blue Rockies, the sun is declining. The stars become still at the close of the day. Beyond the wide prairies, our loved ones lay sleeping, far from the forest, in a place far away. We are the nannies who work upon the railway, swinging our hammers in the bright blazing sun, living on stew and drinking bad whiskey, laying down track till the workday's done. We are the nannies who work upon the railway, swinging our hammers in the bright blazing sun, laying down tracks and building the bridges, bending our backs till the workday's done. So up to the mountains and up through the plains, up through the Muskeg and into the rain, up the St. Lawrence all the way to Gaspé, swinging our hammers and drawing our pay, tying them up and tying them down, into the bunkhouse and into $1 a day and a place for a bed, a drink for the living, a toast to the dead. Oh, the song of the future has been sung. All the battles have been won. On a mountain top we stand. All the world at our command. We have opened up the soil with our teardrops and our toil. Oh, there was a time in this fair land when the railroads did not run, when the wild, majestic mountains stood alone before the sun, long before the white man and long before the wheel, when the green, dark forest was too silent to be real. And many are the dead men, too silent to be real. It's got to be one of the best songs Gordon Lightfoot ever did, and I'm not going to teach it lesson per. I'm not going to give a lesson on it per se, where you know you can follow all the chords, but just a couple things. The timing's kind of funny in a lot of parts. I almost feel like they had an orchestra conductor. They must have to kind of coordinate all that, because you've got some slow downs and some kind of atmospheric passages. It's almost like acoustic prog rock in a few sections there. But just a couple thoughts about that. You know, Gordon Lightfoot, he does this on a lot of his songs. He'll toss in a few, they're not unusual or, you know, contrived or anything, but like he'll play a D, G, A, and then he'll also add a C. And that gives it that kind of, I don't want to call it a hard edge, but yeah, kind of a hard edge, you know. So it doesn't just sound kind of like major, you know, he tosses that in, and it's not minor, but it, you know, when you got like you're a kid in the key of D, and you've got D, G's, and A's, and then he tosses that C in there, and it really is cool. Like he goes, open, bring in the workers and bring up the rail. We gotta lay down the tracks. And see, he's got that C. It's a really, it's kind of flavored all through that song, and it's you know, it's not a weird chord or anything, but it does kind of add another chordal element to the voicing. Another thing, it's got kind of this part. There was a time. It's got a lot of words. Actually, if I do say so myself, I'm good with lyrics. I know tons of lyrics, but this one I kind of was memorizing. Maybe it's good for my brain, memorize songs, because a lot of the songs I know are from when I was a kid. So it was good. I kind of memorized it in the car. I had to play for a funeral this morning. That's why I'm wearing this coat. But there was a time in this. But that's kind of the main part, which is kind of a narrator. You know, railroad did not run when the wild, majestic mountains stood alone against the sun. And that's kind of just key of D, long before the white man. But then he's got this part, which I read it. It's supposed to be like workers. So bring up the workers and bring up. So that's the second part. It's a trilogy. And then you've got this part, which is slow, which is kind of just the grueling, hot work of that railroad. I'm sure many of us would rather not have that job, but somebody had to do it. And hats off to those workers. And I think that's what Gordon Lightfoot was actually giving tribute to, was the people that built those railroads. That's got to be the crummiest work in the world. But he's got that middle section where it's kind of slower. He goes, beyond the blue Rockies, the sun is declining. The stars become still at the close of the day. I like when he says, living on, the next little verse, but living on the stew and drinking bad whiskey. Yeah, Yeah, those were probably some fairly rough men, as you might imagine. They had to be in. They didn't have to go to the gym at the end of the day to stay in shape. Let's put it that way. And probably a fairly rough cut crew, away for long periods of time. But they did the job. The other thing that's kind of cool about that, he talks about the nannies, and I looked that up. That's actually a reference to like navigators, and that was kind of a nickname because there would be a lot of surveying. It was almost like navigating at sea. You had to like have surveyors kind of survey all that land with, some of those different devices they used to survey at that time. So they were sometimes called navies or navigators because they were going through an ocean on land, so to speak, of all that sort of virgin forest or areas that were unknown, at least to them. But just a terrific song. And once again, I apologize for showing images of the United States Transcontinental Railroad. I'm not trying to steal the significance, the Canadian significance of the song, which, but they seem to go well, and they're sort of complementary. They're right around the same time. That Transcontinental Railroad, that was kind of like Eisenhower's interstate, something we take for granted today. But connecting those like the East Coast and the West Coast, it's a big country, so that was a big deal, and probably enabled us to become a nation. And same with Canada, it kind of connected people. And the Eisenhower Interstate had a similar effect. But I would imagine that Transcontinental Railroad, in the history of transportation, it's got to be one of the most significant achievements ever. And it was an achievement. It was science, it was technology, it was strength. Men, every once in a while, I'll give a little credit to men. Chinese men and African-American men, a lot of different people worked on those railroads, and it was crummy work in a lot of ways, but it was a man's work, and they worked their butts off, and they did it. I think the U.S. one was finished in 1869, and that Canadian one was right around the same time. But Gordon Lightfoot's such a good songwriter, and that kind of reminds me like the Edmund Fitzgerald or one of those kind of topical songs that tells the story. And it also kind of reminds me of Seven Island Suite and some of his other ones too, but that Seven Island Suite's kind of similar. It's got a couple different sections. It's kind of like a little composition, almost like a little song cycle. It's got kind of a couple song ideas kind of woven into one coherent song. That's Canadian Railroad Trilogy. He's got a few others like that. Seven Island Suite is another one that comes to mind. Terrific. Terrific, 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 terrific. And hats off to Canada. Hope you all are doing well up there. See, we're all kind of going crazy sometimes, but my family actually came from Canada. My dad's side came from Tavistock, Ontario, around the time of World War I. I think because there was a lot of my dad always said there was a lot of prejudice against Germans, so they moved. I don't know if that had, but he always talked about around that time, and they came to Upper Michigan. So I've always, and I was from the Great Lakes, and certainly grew up going to Canada a lot, Windsor, and But thanks. God bless.